Welcome back to the channel, boxing fans. I'd like to elaborate on this Canelo Alvarez versus Dmitry Bivol a little bit more than my previous video from yesterday. That was just a quick teaser, didn't have the time. So I'm going to start right here with Mr. Canelo Alvarez talking to his teammate, Oscar Valdez, after he lost to Shakur Stevenson last weekend. And the thing about this conversation is Canelo Alvarez is basically chastising Oscar Valdez for what he didn't do as opposed to what they trained for him to do in the fight against Mr. Shakur Stevenson. And in all due fairness, I believe Oscar Valdez should have been at this fight and returned the favor to Mr. Canelo Alvarez because it did not seem like he did what he trained to do, minus that uppercut. So let me get into this fight real quick. The arm attack. We saw this against Callum. And it is a good tactic, but I don't think it was very effective against Dmitry Bivol. On the other hand, Mr. Bivol seemed to have good utilization of his jab. It wasn't a powerful jab. It wasn't a menacing jab. It was an irritating, offsetting jab that kept Canelo Alvarez at the end of his punches, as you can clearly see. Second, I do not believe Canelo possessed any type of defense in this fight. Yes, he put his guards up, but we just saw his stablemate Oscar Valdez last week basically languished in front of Shakur Stevenson with his guards up. That's not a very good tactic to use, but it seems to be something that's synonymous with that camp, maybe. Who knows? Another thing I noticed, Canelo decided to languish on the ropes a bit abnormally. I've never seen him on the ropes so much. And the old baiting or attempting to bait Bivol in did not work. I believe Bivol was way more smarter than that. Anyway, as the fight went on, it was quite obvious that Mr. Canelo Alvarez possibly bit off more than he can chew. By the fourth round, he seemed to be a bit frustrated from the tactics of Mr. Bivol. Bivol's tactics to me was very plain and simple. Maintain a distance, use his jab to offset Canelo Alvarez, and when the time was right, he released series and volleys of combinations that were very effective. I also noticed that possibly due to the height and weight difference as in Canelo moving up to a different weight class, Bivol's punches were able to force Canelo backwards. And we all know fighters such as Canelo, when they're pushed backwards, it causes them to have to reset. And I thought that was a very great tactic upon Mr. Bivol and his team. As the fight proceeded, I started to think, although Canelo is revered as the greatest fighter in the world, this and that and so forth, he seemed to be lost in there and had no recourse, which caused me to think about his training. Now, I noticed a new technique that's been going around the boxing world. Basically, the coach stand there with this pool noodle and wiggles it, and the boxer hits upon command. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but I don't know, man. Sometimes the training is the problem and not the fighter. Who knows? I can't say, but wiggling that pool noodle at a bag does not do anything for me. Besides all that, Canelo Alvarez being the top dog, pay-per-view star and all that, I get it. You really have to beat the champion. You have to beat the system, the fans, and everyone else to beat the champion. And although Dmitry Bivol did this, the scorecard reflected slightly different. I believe no matter what, the judges still sought a way, any way possible, to give Canelo Alvarez this fight without making it look too blatant. This is just an assumption on my part, but I mean, if you look at that scorecard and you actually watch the fight, they just don't line up. But anyway, it does not matter. Dmitry Bivol was victorious. He defeated the great Canelo Alvarez, and by this win, his stock should rise greatly. As far as a rematch, when presented with this question, post-fight interviews, Canelo Alvarez was very evasive on his answer. I believe he gave the old canned answer of have to talk and discuss things with the team. But I honestly do not recommend him fight Dmitry Bivol again. Bivol has his number and or numbers now. And unless Canelo Alvarez can make a major turnaround in his technique and his approach to fighting Dmitry Bivol, it's not advisable that he fight him again, because I believe the outcome might be worse than this one. Another thing to note, Reynoso's camp has just lost 2 weekends in a row. And I know next up would be Mr. Andy Ruiz Jr. fighting Luis Ortiz. Mr. Ruiz Jr. might want to consider his next camp in preparation for such a fight, seeing that 2 down, there's 1 more slot to lose. And I do notice that Andy Ruiz has his own gym now. I think he should maybe find him a better coach and prepare himself correctly for the fight against Mr. King Kong Ortiz, because I tell you what, this will be a pivotal fight for Mr. Andy Ruiz Jr. If he wants to get back in that heavyweight contention, he has to beat Ortiz. And with the way the training camp is going, just speculation from my part, by the way, Andy Ruiz most likely don't want to be the third one from that camp to lose. So, anyway, that's pretty much my thoughts on this fight. Most people might think I'm a Canelo Alvarez hater. And I'm actually not a hater of Canelo Alvarez. I like him. I like what he does in the ring. But I do not like the way he goes about it in the ring, as far as the engineering of opponents to propel him in his career. But as the old saying goes, in order for one to know victory, one must also know defeat. And although he already knew defeat from Floyd Mayweather Jr., maybe a current day time defeat is also needed. I'm out.